Welcome to this week's Two Angry Men, where Harvey and Mark discuss Trump's pardon of Diddy. Enjoy.
Would Diddy pledge allegiance to Donald Trump in return for a pardon?
I think you want to know the truth. I think yes.
Welcome to the Two Angry Men podcast. Mark, I had your colleague, Mark Agnifilo, Diddy's lead lawyer, on TMZ Live yesterday. And he kind of dropped something really interesting. Home confinement instead of prison for Diddy. And here's the way it came up. I asked him about whether Diddy was getting therapy for anger management and for substance abuse. And he said there was already a plan to engage professionals from the outside. And as soon as I heard him say outside, I was ready. And I asked him, well, wait a minute. Does this mean because on the outside, you're saying you can get better treatment than on the inside? And if you're already looking for people, the way I'm connecting the dots is that you're going to ask for home confinement so he can get therapy to help him rehabilitate himself. And he said, well, yeah, possibly. He's such a good lawyer. I don't think the word possibly is the right answer for this. I think certainly is the right answer.
Well, remember in federal court, when you have the sentencing guidelines, and which are no longer, you're no longer constrained, but they're advisory, as you know. If you look at the guidelines on this case, the guidelines are very low and arguably should be very low, given that the judge was the one who ordered that they kind of survey all past cases to see if they've ever come up with a comparable situation. I don't know that anybody's come up with anything that's comparable. And when I say that, what I mean is where you have been convicted of a Mann Act violation, you're sitting in custody, and the facts around it are that a male was transported across state lines to have a sex act, but not with you. So that's a pretty unique situation. Given that situation, the sentencing guidelines, contrary to what the prosecution was arguing the day of the acquittals, remember they stood up then.
Yep.
Maureen Comey had said, I think she said 41 to 50 months or 50 to 61 months or something in that range, which I thought was way above where the guidelines are. I think the guidelines here are somewhere in that 20-month range. All of that is a long way of saying, if you go below that, which arguably you should in this case because of the unique facts that I just said, that generally gives you a split sentence. That's what they call a split sentence in federal court. Split sentence would be you do a period of confinement and then a period of home arrest. So you were there, you got it. A split sentence should be, he should be out. He will have done a year at the time of sentencing if the president does not intervene, and that the remainder of that sentence should be done at home under home confinement.
Oh my gosh, that is so interesting because what Agnifilo was talking about was supervised confinement. And I thought to myself, I can't remember the exact term, is supervised, but what he was insinuating was that it would be part of his sentence, almost like a halfway house. And that's exactly what you're saying, that
Correct.
yeah.
There's a slight difference between, obviously more than a slight difference, but you have a halfway house, which is generally when you've been sent to prison, and then before you get released, a lot of times there'll be that way station, which is a halfway house, depending on how much time is spent, things of that nature. But in a situation where you've got time in, and he has a considerable amount of time in, if you follow the guidelines or go below the guidelines, then you're looking at a sentence that he'd be released under supervised release, which is what a lot of people would normally understand to be probation. And then on condition of home confinement. I had, for instance, last year a client who was given home confinement and did not do time in custody, but was given home confinement for a 6-month period of time and was put on the monitor, basically, and had terms and conditions. You can go to church, you can go to medical appointments, things of that nature.
That totally makes sense now that I think back to the interview. So what he's saying is Diddy will have put in almost a year behind bars. And
More than a year.
if he gets 2 years, Agnifilo actually said 2 to 3, but I think it's somewhere between 1.5 and 3. But even if
it's funny you say 1.5 and 3. The way I calculate the sentencing guidelines, I think it's between 20 and 27 months if he doesn't get something to go below that.
Right. So if he splits the difference, I mean, theoretically, Diddy, if the judge buys this supervised release, which clearly now Mark even mentioned supervised release specifically in my interview with him. So that's what he's talking about. So basically saying, essentially give him time served behind bars, send him home. He'll be under home arrest, essentially home confinement for the duration of that, whether it's another 12 or 15 months or whatever. So that's what he's asking for. And that's why they've already assembled this team of professionals to give him therapy, right?
Well, the federal criminal defense lawyers who practice or the people who work in the federal system are going to email me and say, you make it clear that there's always going to be supervised release, and that's I'll make that clear. But yes, you could have a team of professionals. You could have.
Well, Mark said it. Mark already said. He told me they were assembling a team of professionals.
You could cooperate with a plan that the court orders. I mean, there's a laundry list of conditions the court can order. That could be them. Look, you've heard me say this 100 times. I've known Sean for years, well over a decade. I think you can directly correlate the violence in his life to the periods of time when he was struggling with substance abuse. I think there is a direct correlation. I think that he recognized that. I think he said it. I think after the 2016 incident when he hit rock bottom, he got and understood he had a problem. So if you're looking at this holistically, globally, and I know there's always going to be the people who say, no, there's no forgiveness, blah, blah, blah. Understand something. He was acquitted of the mandatory minimum counts. So a judge has to sit there and say to himself, okay, I know what he was convicted of. The whole mandate of being a federal judge is no disparity in sentencing, which is why, in my opinion, I haven't talked to him, obviously, except that one time where he said he was subscribing to Watch You and Me. But where the no disparity in sentences is why His Honor issued an order that said, give me a survey of similarly situated cases. I want to make sure that I don't engage in some kind of disparity, that I don't, I mean, he didn't say this, but I would say, if I was sitting on the bench, I would say, just because the prosecutor gets up here and starts saying 50 to 60 months, or we're going to do considerably more, are they doing that because that's what the guidelines call for, or are they doing that because they're sore losers?
Okay, so we need to talk about two other things. We need to talk about how baby oil ended up being the most powerful thing in his defense, and then we need to talk about a possible pardon. But before we do, I just want to call you out on something. You were saying, I know there are people who say that what he did is unforgivable, but the jury acquitted him. Yeah, the jury acquitted him, but you got to understand that the public doesn't have to base its evaluation only on a jury verdict, because the Cassie video wasn't on trial there. And there are people who are looking at that saying, I don't care what a court did or didn't do. I don't care what a prosecutor did or didn't do. What I care about is what Diddy did, and that I saw it with my own eyes, and I heard testimony that seems consistent with it. So I don't think you can dismiss people who have that opinion. It's sort of like you got to live with that opinion. but not dismiss it like, oh, well, the jury found him not guilty on those 3 counts. This case involves more than those 3 counts for the public, and he needs to
Well,
deal with the public.
I agree, but that is for the PR people, that is for crisis managers, that's for a different, that's not the judicial.
I know, but I'm just saying you made a
And
comment where
by the way,
you
he
just kind of
was not.
dismissed it.
Well, I dismiss it in this sense. They use that video, in my humble opinion, is the only reason he was tried in this case. I don't think he ever would have been filed on but for that video. And I think that the prosecutors made that the centerpiece of their prosecution, even though that was not what he was charged with. By the way, if he was charged with that, if he was, it would have been in the I believe the city of Los Angeles. It would have been a misdemeanor filing, and the statute of limitations.
No way. No way would that have been a misdemeanor, Mark. Mark, come on.
I'm telling you right now,
Mark.
That's why the statute, Harvey, I'm telling you, it's a horrific video.
It's a felony. This is not a felony. It's a felony. There are injuries. You know that's a felony.
I'm telling you, if you did not have a complainant, you didn't have a complainant, Harvey. Just remember that. You did not have somebody going to the police to make a report. You had no investigation on that. You had an investigation after the fact.
But you said if they prosecuted. I'm saying 50%.
They wouldn't have prosecuted him. The only way they would have prosecuted, let me just explain it. You can jump all over it. I'm giving you the what the prosecutors would have said. If the prosecutor had that tape, if they had that tape in real time or within the statute of limitations, and they had no complainant, they're not going to file that as a felony.
50% of the cases that involve domestic violence in the LA County DA's office are with non-cooperative victims, and they still prosecute, and they get a 90+% conviction rate. So I disagree with you.
But do you want to go down the road a little bit on that? They have a non-cooperative. When was the person non-cooperative? That means at the time you go to trial or go to a preliminary hearing. I'm telling you, if you didn't have a complainant in real time, that you would not have a felony complaint. That's my humble opinion.
I disagree, but you know what just struck me?
What?
If Diddy wasn't prosecuted by the feds and the tape came out, he would be in a worse position, way worse than he is now, because the Southern District of New York filed charges, made such a big deal about this, and lost. Diddy can claim victory. If they never filed and the tape came out and it was a standalone, he never could ever resurface, I think.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think that, look, if this is a perfect example, and I think will be a textbook example, looking forward to see how he deals with it. I mean, I think one of the reasons, he was excoriated in some quarters for that apology that he did, the apology tape, which I think you were one of the first, or your outlet was one of the first to put up. After that tape surfaced, he knew in real time that was unforgivable. And I think, to quote Tenny in her opening statement, if that's what he was on trial for, he wouldn't have been on trial because he would have accepted it. That's not what he was on trial for in the strict legal sense. But to my point, and I think your point, that's why he was tried.
Yep, I agree with that. So the other thing I talked to Agnifilo about that was just fascinating to me, I went back to 9 months before Diddy was tried, and we did a documentary on Diddy for Tubi, and I interviewed Mark, and Mark said to me when I was asking him about the baby oil, he said, 1,000 bottles of baby oil, I don't know, maybe he went to Costco just to get a supply or something like that. And he made light of it. And he was torn apart by the public and the media when he said that. And I was thinking, God, why did he say that? And now I know that he had a plan all along and he delivered it in his closing argument. And I talked to him about this and I said, look, and I said, it turned out the way I see it, that the best thing going for you was the baby oil, which everybody thought was the worst thing. The prosecution made such a big deal about it at their news conference, and the media made such a big deal, including TMZ, that, when it finally came time for the jury to hear the case, Agnifilo could scoff and say, wow, the streets are safer now that 70 Homeland Security agents seized baby oil. The streets are safer. And he literally looked at the jury and said, ooh. And he said he just did a line early on in the closing argument where he made fun of the baby oil and the jury laughed. And he said, as soon as they laughed, I knew I had them. And then he just did like a one-man show about baby oil and Astroglide. And I gotta say that
And you know what?
I didn't see that coming when I did that interview with him months before, but he planned this all along.
And by the way, what was the one time in a very serious opening statement that Penny gave? One time
Baby oil.
that there was a laugh. What was the one time?
Baby oil.
Baby oil. And in an offhand remark, Tenny said, and we all know his, whatever it was, affliction or passion for baby oil, and got a laugh. And I've often said, if you've got a jury that's laughing, that's not a convicting jury.
Yeah. And it's so funny that in a weird way, that was, I mean, that's a turning point in the case, that the prosecution made such a big deal of it. And then the jury's thinking, okay, and then what? What does that show? And, and then to bring in Astroglide, it was Agnifilo's point all along when he kept saying, this is a bedroom police prosecution. And, I got to say, he's brilliant, because when I did that interview, I knew he was talking about bedroom police, but I didn't connect all the dots when I was listening to him. And now it's really obvious to me that that was his plan all along. It was just hammer home what they seized.
And by the way, the timing could not have been better, because you try this case in New York, you rest and do your argument, and then you go into Pride weekend. And I told you this before, I walked for hours to try and get through Pride weekend. Pride weekend on the streets of New York, which is like Mardi Gras on steroids. I mean, is really one of the funnest things you've ever seen or experienced, at least I have. And then you go into jury deliberations on a Monday, and you're talking about, as one of the alternate jurors said, some rather tame sex tapes. And you say to yourself, what are we doing here? Why are we here? It really fits in with this idea of the, as you call it, the bedroom police. I mean, that's something that resonates with Americans. Americans don't want the government in the bedroom.
You're right. Talk to me about pardon, because I know, and I don't even think you're going to deny it, that the defense has been in touch with the White House and they have talked about this. I also obviously know, as everybody does, that Donald Trump did an interview where he said, Diddy didn't support me in the last election. He wasn't very nice, so it's kind of unlikely. So he didn't say no, but he certainly didn't say yes, and he seemed inclined not to.
He did say, I've watched that interview, and I've watched the previous back in May question. The interview was with Finnerty from Newsmax. Finnerty specifically asked him about it, and him being the president. And the president said, my people have talked to me about it, and I do know Sean, and I've known him for a long time, and we got along, not well, but something happened when I ran for office. That way he was very clear. Finnerty was the one who said, you mean, so it's unlikely? And the president said, well, I suppose, but then returned to it when they asked him about Santos and said again, Santos's people, or Santos has not asked him, but his people, meaning the presidents, have talked to him about it. Let me make my argument, because I got into this kind of spirited discussion with Megyn Kelly. Megyn takes the position he should never do it. I take a different position. I think that they both were prosecuted, both the president and Sean were prosecuted in New York, both under initiated under the previous administration. Both, in Sean's case, was Damian Williams, who then went on, who was basically auditioning to be the attorney general for Kamala, and had put on his website when he left the office that he went after Eric Adams and he went after Sean Combs. When both of them had RICO actions, both of them were thought to be prosecuted by proxy, so to speak. And I think that if you ask Sean, I honestly believe this. I think if you ask Sean, he'd say, look, after being what I've been through, I get it. I understand. All the people who now say, why is Trump doing this? Why is Trump doing that? You have to go through a criminal prosecution and the hell that it puts somebody through to understand that you never really recuperate from that. And I think that that's true for the president. And I think it's true for Sean Combs. And so there's something that resonates there. I think that the president can say to himself, I've been there. I went through both civil and criminal cases that were kind of bullshit. And by the way, who was sitting next to him? The deputy attorney general was sitting next to him, Todd Blanche. So I'm not so sure that it's unlikely. I think that it's more than likely.
Yeah, but what you're missing is loyalty. That means everything to him, and he punishes his enemies and rewards his friends. And he may have been friendly with Diddy, but Diddy did not support him, and Trump remembers that and said he remembers.
Yeah, but then again, take a look at the people he ran against in the primaries and some of the things that he said, and then those people came back. Look at Marco Rubio. He used to call Marco Little Marco. Marco used to say horrible things. He came back home.
Yeah, but he beat him. I mean, that was the saving grace. He beat him, and then Marco Rubio supported him.
Look at Sean. Sean's sitting in custody. Where did taking on Trump get him?
Well,
by the way,
not the same thing.
Well, where did supporting the Democrats get Sean? It didn't get him. He was one of the early guys on Obama. He was very supportive and said some things that I bet you he would take back now, having been through the system. I used to say that a Democrat was a Republican who'd been indicted. And now it's almost the opposite. It's a Republican, or Democrats are a Republican. There is, when you have this kind of a lawfare, for lack of a better term, I've never really embraced that. But when you use the criminal justice system for political purposes, I think that it really gives you insight into just how dangerous it is.
Would Diddy pledge?
What do you think? You don't think that at this point that the president would or should commute or pardon?
I think if he does it, it's going to be as a diversion to Epstein. And that, to me, is the biggest play that you have, is that Donald Trump needs a diversion. And he's trying everything under the sun, and it's not working. And Diddy might work, or at least he might think it would work, so that he would do it, because I think people would go nuts. And I think he wants them to, in a way that makes them not talk as much about Epstein. So that, to me, is the best thing for him. Let me ask you something.
Well, can I push back a little bit there?
Yeah.
There is an argument that Diddy is an Epstein prosecution by proxy. Once again, Damian Williams, Ghislaine Maxwell, the same prosecutor, Maureen Comey, was Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine and Diddy, and in the civil case, which we've talked about episodes past, there was the declaration to not release the matters pertaining to Epstein, while at the same time prosecuting Diddy and basically kind of look over here, not over here. I mean, there is an argument that but for Epstein, there wouldn't have been a Diddy prosecution. But for the Intercontinental tape, there wouldn't have been a prosecution of Diddy. And but for kind of all this brouhaha and what was going on in the Southern District, that he wouldn't even be in custody right now. And, by the way, if Donald Trump had not won the election, imagine where he'd be right now.
Oh, that's true. That's absolutely true. Be honest with me on this.
Okay, only if you're honest when I ask you the question in back.
Okay. Would Diddy pledge allegiance to Donald Trump in return for a pardon?
I think you want to know the truth. I think yes. And do you know why? I don't know that it would be like a fealty oath or anything else. I think, having done this for 40 some odd years, what happens to people when they go through a criminal case. I've watched it. I can't remember the last time that a client didn't say to me after a criminal case, "How do you do this for a living? How do you go through this?" I remember clients saying they've made a caricature of me. The prosecutors have. There's something about that fraternity of people who have been accused and have gone through the process that gives you an affinity. And it would not surprise me to hear Sean say, "I now get it. I understand it, and I was wrong then, and I don't know that I would say he's pledging loyalty, but I think he would probably say, I now get what he went through."
I know the defense has gone and talked to the White House. If I were to jump to a
Didn't
conclusion,
Agnifilo deny that yesterday?
I know it's happened, right? I mean, you and I know it's happened. So,
well, I would say the president said, I'd be precise. The president said his people have talked to him. So, and by the way, I just so that people understand, back in May, I think it was Fox who asked in the Oval Office, "What about Diddy?" And the president said, "I knew him. He hasn't asked me, and blah, blah, blah," but he was thinking about it. You have to be under a rock not to have thought about it.
No, I understand, but there was communication, and I know this, and you know this too. And maybe you won't answer this, but would I be jumping to conclusions to think that there wasn't a discussion about how Diddy would speak of the president in return for a pardon?
Well, I don't know that there's ever been that discussion. I can't go that far, but I would.
Oh, really?
Not. I would, but it would not.
For those of you listening, Mark just smiled.
Yes, I did. I smiled because I think people are somewhat naive about what happens when you're sitting in custody, having been tried, rolling the dice, winning, but still in custody. I just think there's a naive aspect to the idea that you wouldn't understand or have an affinity for somebody else who's been through the system. The system chews you up. Famously, the original Ray Donovan, Department of Labor head, said after he was acquitted on the courthouse steps, "Where do I get my reputation back?"
Do I take that as I wouldn't be jumping to a conclusion?
No, I just don't think I would make it as quid pro quo that you've got to say something. I think there is an honest
wink.
I think there's an honest affinity for anybody who goes through the process with anybody else who's gone through it. Ask anybody famously who's been through the process whether or not they have empathy for somebody else who's been accused. It's a horrible thing to be accused.
No doubt. But then again, the question is, how much empathy does Donald Trump have for people who didn't necessarily support him, unless they say that they found religion and will if they get something in return?
He seems to me to be fairly forgiving. I don't know that he isn't forgiving. I mean, you'll say it's more transactional. I hear people saying it's transactional.
Yes.
I just think, look, the president said in that Finnerty interview, he said he doesn't want what was said to cloud his judgment. He said it. I didn't say it. Finnerty didn't say it. He said it. He wants to do what's fair. He also said he was found, what did he say? Half innocent. I think, frankly, it was 60% acquittal, 3 out of 5. So he's obviously talked to his people. He obviously sees that it's unfair. Anytime you have a verdict like this where somebody rolled the dice and they were trying to take away his net worth. I hadn't even talked about that. They tried to take away in the Todd Blanche case. You're trying to take away his net worth there as well.
I get it. I mean, sometimes I talk to you and you're such a lawyer. I can read through the whole thing. I can read through this whole thing.
I want to take credit for something.
What?
And here's the question. When we first started doing this podcast, were you an active lawyer?
You're right around it.
No, you were not. You only activated your license after we started doing this. Think about it.
Yeah, I don't remember the timing, but maybe.
I do.
So
I
what?
remember
But so what?
I'm just going to say you can say you're a lawyer. You're now active.
I was a lawyer. When I was an inactive member.
You used to be. You were inactive. Now you're active.
Dude, you're a lawyer if you're a lawyer. Whether you're an active or inactive, you're a lawyer. Come on, give me a break.
I always think you got to.
Oh my God. Are you serious?
Yes,
so this is what you're resorting to not to answer my question.
What was that? By the way, what was that TMZ clip that you used to play all the time about you being a lawyer?
I am a lawyer.
Okay. Well, now you're active. Now you're licensed.
No, I was a lawyer before, Mark. Give me a break.
When was the last time you had a case?
It doesn't matter. I did have cases, but
I know you did.
But
How long ago?
Do you think
How long ago?
A long time ago? But
when you were on?
I got out.
I know. When you were on Channel, you bailed. You were early money. When you were on Channel 2, were you active and were you practicing?
I was partly active, and then I thought, why am I still active? And at a point, I just said, this is ridiculous if I'm not practicing. So I went inactive.
How long did you practice?
And I saved some money. I taught law school for 6 years, and I practiced for a couple.
And what was the most serious case you ever tried?
Well, the funnest case I ever tried was, it's funny. I don't know. I don't want to go down memory lane too much, but I worked at a law firm in downtown LA, and I had taught law school right out of law school. I went down to Florida and taught at University of Miami, and for a year, and I loved it. And when I went to practice, I didn't like it as much, and I went to one of the partners and I said, "Look," I said, I know the way this works here, and that if you are on the path to partnership, you basically have to do research for 5 years, and you never see a courtroom. I'm not going to be here for 5 years. And I said, I'm just going to be honest with you. So I know you get these shitty little cases, with $20,000, $30,000, $50,000, where big clients say, handle this for me. And I know they're just a pain for you guys. Give me those cases for a couple of years. I'll handle all of them. And they bought it. And they gave me these, $50,000 cases, which is nothing for the firm. But for me, I got to try cases. And I spent a lot of time in court and handling actual cases on my own as a young lawyer. And so once I was representing the city of Catalina, because the firm did a lot of municipal law, and we were suing, along with 19 other plaintiffs, the SS Catalina, because they owed everybody money and they were going under. And I think they filed for bankruptcy and everybody was trying to get money. And so this is my first taste of the media where where the media got interested just because the SS Catalina was a big landmark. And there were these 19 old guys and me. And I said, guys, I'll handle the media on this one. And I used to go down to the courthouse steps and I would talk to the media, and it was hysterical. It was hysterical. So I thought, I kind of like this. This is fun.
You know, the guy, it's funny, as long as we're reminiscing, we can end with this. The guy who I always thought was early money on handling media when it came to criminal cases, at least, was Howard Weitzman.
Oh,
And I remember the DeLorean case, and Howard and Don Ray.
yeah, don't forget Don Ray.
Yeah, well, Don is one of the great lawyers of.
And Howard would come down those steps. That's when I was a reporter, and I used
Right.
to interview Howard every day in the courthouse steps, thinking, "Oh, they are going to so lose this case." That didn't
I mean,
happen.
that was talk about having
On
a
camera.
videotape. It was on camera.
You
I
see
think
the
the
cocaine
lawyer-
deal.
Yeah, this is better than gold or something.
It
along
was
those lines.
exactly that. And they're looking at cocaine, and there's an FBI agent, and DeLorean wins. That was just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and then Howard, after that case, went back to, I think, Michigan, and tried yet another case and got him acquitted back there.
Yeah.
I mean, it was back to back with that case, got no attention, but back to back.
Okay, we're showing our age.
Great Howard Weitzman.
We're showing our age. Take care of yourself. I'll see you next week.
Okay,
Yeah.
bye-bye.
Bye.